Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Tommy, and today I'm gonna be talking about the Song of Achilles. It's a very popular book on TikTok, and it's actually part of this new concept that I'm gonna be starting this year, which is essentially that I'm gonna be taking a popular book from TikTok and I'm gonna be giving you guys an in-depth analysis of the book. So let me know down below if you're interested by this concept and which book eventually you would like me to review next. That being said, I'm gonna dedicate 2 videos to this particular book because I rated the Song of Achilles 3 stars. So this video will explain why I knocked 1 star for my review, and the next video that will be coming out in a couple of days will explain why I knocked down the 2nd star, giving it a total of a 3-star review. So from 5 to 3, that is 2 stars, 2 videos. Which bring me to the question of the day: is the point of view of a useless protagonist worth writing about? So before we start, a quick disclaimer. This video contains spoilers, so if you haven't read the book, proceed with caution. So the author of the book, Madeline Miller, made the bold decision to narrate the book from Patroclus' point of view. And I really liked the idea. It was a bold choice that could have been very interesting. The very idea of giving a voice to a normally and traditionally silenced character was a very intriguing and a very seductive concept indeed. But if you're gonna be bold, you need to be bold all the way. Having a good idea is not good enough. And in that respect, she failed. The main issue that I have with the book is Patroclus himself. From the source material, we already know that Achilles is the traditional hero of the story. So what's the point of showing Patroclus' POV if you're not going to do something different with that concept? If you're not going to show us something new from the source material, from Iliad by Homer? To illustrate what I mean, let's create Patroclus' personality card. From the very beginning of the book, Patroclus is described as weak, sly, not sickly, but not strong, and it definitely doesn't know how to sing. Like, homeboy has nothing for himself. Like, he brings nothing to the table. That in itself is not a big deal because it's the beginning of the story and we start where Patroclus is a young boy. The issue is that that original state of our main character kind of never changes. The love between Patroclus and Achilles is very superficial, and I mean that like literally superficial. The vast majority of Patroclus' thoughts and Patroclus' narration about Achilles is centered about Achilles' beauty and his physical looks. The first thing that Patroclus notices about Achilles is his beautiful hair and his beautiful feet. Like, Patroclus is quite literally obsessed with Achilles' feet, and I get it, like the author is trying to make like a nod to Achilles' feet, which is the only place where he's supposed to be vulnerable, but that is kind of like a myth on top of the myth. That has never actually been the case. Apart from that, it just seems really weird. Patroclus comes off as a weirdo that is quite literally obsessed, and his obsession with Achilles' beauty continues even when he dies, like even when he's in the grave. While Achilles is literally out here slaughtering people, Patroclus, which is quite literally dead, is out here being like, oh my god, it's so gorgeous, look at his beautiful hair and his beautiful figure. I'm like, bro, get your shit together, you're dead. Like, can you focus on other things? And if you ask Patroclus what he likes about Achilles, he will tell you that he likes Achilles because Achilles is beautiful and because Achilles likes him. And if you ask Achilles why he likes Patroclus, he will tell you that because Patroclus is different, and by different it means that Patroclus is quiet and quite docile. And we can all agree that if you ever ask your man or your girl, why do you love me? And the first thing that they say is that I love you because you are beautiful, well, we all know that that's a red flag. And once again, do you see where the problem is? Like, you like somebody because they're quiet and docile. Like, this is not giving the love story it was supposed to give. This is giving codependency. It's giving toxic. It's giving why are you two together? They literally have nothing really in common, and there's nothing really actually profound about their love. And although the book set out the story to be like an epic love story like none before, that transcends ages and whatever, it's actually quite shallow and falls short of that promise. Because when you scrape a little bit over, oh my god, Achilles have a fine ass and his hair is so beautiful and luscious in the sun, if you scratch a little bit past that, Their love is quite hollow, and it just ends up being more of a toxic codependency and physical attraction, hence the confusion between love and infatuation. And building on top of that, Patroclus' love for Achilles actually comes from a place of lack. The first time that Patroclus sees Achilles was at a race, and Achilles dominated. After all, he's kind of like a demigod, so what do you expect, right? And that's actually the very moment where he fell in love with him, because Achilles had everything that Patroclus lacked. He was loved, he had fame, recognition, support. Achilles' father doted on his son and praised him and showed him to everybody, while Patroclus only met contempt and disapproval from his father. So it's not really that he loved him from a place of abundance, but rather from a place of lack. And that's essentially how infatuation starts. You know, some people don't really love you. They love the proximity that they get by being next to you. They love the proximity to greatness. You know, like there's some friends or some guys or girls or whatever that will see you living your best life, being your bad self, and they will come and leech onto you. They don't necessarily want you to fail, but they don't necessarily want you to succeed either. They just like the idea of being close to you, close to greatness, close to your bad self. It's kind of like they're living vicariously through you. So it's not love, it's not friendship, it's just that you represent something that they lack, so they need to be next to you. They want to see what you're doing, what your net update is. They just want to be next to you. They don't have anything to provide, they don't have anything to add on to your already good existence, they don't bring anything to the table, but they just want to be at your table. That is essentially Patroclus with Achilles. And that's also the reason why Patroclus has a very hard time standing up to Achilles. He is unable to say no, unable to say you're wrong, unable to say I do not agree, because what he derived from that relationship is selfish. It's not a relationship that is trying to improve the next person. It's a relationship where he's trying to prove to himself that he did something by being next to Achilles. Like he's trying to fill a void. So their relationship is actually very unequal, which brings me to the third and I think the most important character trait of Patroclus is passivity. A protagonist needs to move the story forward so that we, the reader, can relate to him and his choices. That's basically how we know who they are, through the choices that they make or do not make. We know that Achilles is proud because despite seeing soldiers die day after day after day, he refuses to go back into battle if the chief of the army, Agamemnon, does not come directly to him to apologize and give him back his treasure, Briseis. We also know that Achilles can be cruel because despite having already killed Hector, he dragged his body day in and day out along the walls of the Trojan city in front of Hector's family, so much that even Achilles' men themselves were kind of disgusted, and even the gods, like even in the original, even in Iliad, the gods themselves that were on the Greek side were also disgusted because they were like, damn, like boy, you're doing way too much. And mind you, the gods are known to be like mass murderers and RAPEs, and even them were looking at him side eye like, boy, what the F are you doing? Because denying someone rest is the utmost form of dishonor and cruelty that you could inflict on someone at that time. And Hector, my boy, did not deserve that. We also know that Achilles desires glory and recognition above all things. Despite knowing that he wasn't going to come back alive from the Trojan War, despite knowing that he was going to meet his fate, he still went to battle. Achilles' priorities are clear. For better or for worse, whether you agree with his choices or not, we know who he is, we know where he stands. Patroclus, on the other end, is just there. There's no real evolution in Patroclus' character. At no point does he do something that dramatically changed the story or moved the story forward, or even more importantly, established him as an individual character, as an individual act, as a self-sufficient character that could hold his ground and that had a good reason to actually be in the story, apart from being Achilles' bedmate. When Theseus, Achilles' mother, told him that Achilles wasn't going to survive and he wasn't going to come back from this war, My boy doesn't try to stop his lover. He doesn't try to tell him like, bro, listen, I do not agree with it. I do not agree with whatever you're going on. You are not going to go and die. You need to stay here with me. No. Instead, we have this very useless passage in the book where he basically gaslit himself and auto-convince himself by saying, well, Achilles is a hothead, so even if I told him not to go to war, he wouldn't listen. So me telling him not to go will actually be me betraying him. So I'm not even going to tell him not to go. I'm just going to stick beside my man and say nothing and just let him leave. How convenient. Like, who need enemies when you have that kind of lover? Like, damn. And do not get me wrong, the goal is not for Patroclus to actually change Achilles' destiny, because that is virtually impossible. And if you want to know why, stay tuned for next week's video. Anyways, that is impossible. Rather, what is disturbing is his lack of effort. And in that respect, Patroclus' passiveness is actually his most dominant trait. For instance, when he discovered that Achilles was on the island of Scairo and that he had not only married but also had intercourse with Princess D not once but twice, do you think that Patroclus put on a fight? Do you think that he was upset? Do you think that he was like, you know what? F you, how dare you do this to me? Do you think he did that? Do you think he did that like any normal human being would? No. Essentially, there was no real fight. Like, the fight was like maybe like a page before it was like, oh, I forgive you. There was no real fight. There was no real tension. There was no real controversy. There was no real dynamic within the relationship. It was just Achilles smiling and Patroclus basically saying, oh, his smile is so beautiful and I don't ever want it to go away, so I'm gonna forgive him. What? Come again? Also, side note, when Patroclus discovered that Princess D was actually pregnant, the first thing that he did was describe Achilles' reaction. I'm like, wait a minute. So you discovered that your boo got another chick pregnant and your first reaction was to describe your boo's reaction to the news and not your reaction. It wasn't, oh, Princess D said she's pregnant and everything just went blank in my mind and I was so devastated and I was da-da-da-da-da. No, it was rather Achilles looked shocked. And I'm like, bro, did you forget that you're also in the book? Did you forget that you're also playing the character in the book? Like, bro, keep it together. Let me just read some passages so that we are on the same page. I am pregnant, the princess whispered. I was watching Achilles when she said it, and I saw the horror on his face. Lycomedes made a noise of pain. My chest felt hollow and eggshell thin. Enough, perhaps I said it. Perhaps I said it. Perhaps I only thought it. Bitch, you only thought it. I let go of Achilles' hand and trotted to the door. Theseus must have moved aside for me. I would have run into her if she had not. Alone, I stepped into the darkness. Wait, Achilles shouted. It took him longer to reach me than he should have, I noted with detachment. The dress must be tangled in his legs. He caught up to me, seized my hand. Let go, I said. Please wait, please. Let me explain. I did not want to do it. My mother, he was breathless, almost panting. I had never seen him so upset. She led the girl to my room. She made me. I did not want you. My mother said, she said. He was stumbling over his words. She said that if I did as she said, she would tell you where I was. Patroclus, do you hear me? Please say something. I could not stop imagining her skin beside his, her swinging breast and curvy hips. I remember the long days I grieved for him, my hand empty hand hidden. You did it for nothing. How could he be so foolish? The angry words pricked in my mouth, but I tried to speak them. I found I could not. His cheeks were flushed with shame, and his skin beneath his eyes were weary. His trust was a part of him, as much as his hand and his miraculous feet. And despite my hurt, I would not wish to see it gone, to see him as uneasy and fearful as the rest of us, for any price. Not even for his dignity, I guess. He was watching me closely, reading my face over and over, like a priest searching for an answer. I could see the slight line in his forehead that meant utmost concentration. Something shifted in me then, like the frozen surface of the epidanos in spring. I had seen the way he looked at Princess D, or rather the way he did not. It was the same way he looked at the boys in Parthia, blank and unseen. He had never not once looked at me that way. Forgive me, he said. I did not want you. It was not you. I did not like it. Then it smoothed the last of the jagged grave that had begun when Princess D shouted his name. My throat was thick with the beginning of tears. There is nothing to forgive, I said. Seriously? Seriously? This entire conversation is one page. In one page, he basically auto-convinced himself that it's fine, I forgive him, whatever. Passivity. Is unable to actually speak out, create ultimatums. He is basically unable to stand his ground. So basically his only personality is that he loves Achilles, but even on Achilles, he doesn't have any power. He can't stop him from going to the war. He can't say no. He's basically useless. A quick disclaimer before we continue. Some people were actually quite shocked by this passage in the book, as it touches on the concept, or at least on the idea of non-consensual rapport. And the book actually hints to non-consensual and even RAPE twice in a rather ambiguous way, and I will actually dedicate a separate video to address that matter. So don't be shocked. I'm not gonna take it into account in this video, but it will be addressed shortly. So going back to Patroclus, so he's just a side character. Even worse, he's a narrator, and that's the dichotomy with Patroclus' character. He's central, but at the same time he's not. He narrates the story, but at the same time he plays in the story, but it doesn't really impact the story. It's like, where do we place you? Now I can already see you guys coming for me in the comments, because to be fair, Patroclus did take 2 actions. He did do something. So let's talk about it. He took 2 actions. The first action that he took was to betray Achilles himself. So essentially, Agamemnon took braces from Achilles, and braces was given to him by the Greek soldier as an honor for his prowess on the battlefield. And so she was a gift of war. Great, what a time to be a woman. So she was a gift of war to Achilles for his prowess on the battlefield. And because Achilles stood up to Agamemnon, Agamemnon took braces, so basically disrespecting Achilles in front of the entire Greek army. And Achilles, in his pride and in his wrath, decided that he was not gonna fight for the Greek anymore. He was like, you know what, you are on your own. F you guys. The idea is that Achilles wanted to let Agamemnon defy Briseis, and by doing so he would have had the right to kill Agamemnon. And Patroclus, being the good guy that he is, decided to go to Agamemnon and tell Agamemnon, listen, Achilles wants you to actually defy Briseis, and when you do that, he's gonna kill you. So yeah, you've been warned. And Agamemnon was like, oh, wait a minute, that is true. I'm gonna keep her, so I'm still gonna be disrespecting Achilles in front of the entire army, but I'm not gonna touch her. That way he can't kill me. That was the very first act that Patroclus took against Achilles. For me, that's good. That's awesome. That shows that he's a good guy. And at this point, I was actually so proud. I was ready. I was rooting for Patroclus. I was like, yes, my boy is actually taking actions. He's actually taking steps. And then homeboy came with action number 2. And I was like, bitch, no. And I was like, you know what? I apologize. I take it back. Stop taking actions. Go back into passivity. Go back to being Achilles' bed mate, because thinking is not for you. Thinking was not made for you, because Patroclus' second act was to dress up as Achilles and go into battle dressed as Achilles. Yeah. At this point, I spent the entire book wanting him to actually do something that make me relate to him, because I was literally sick of being trapped in the head of a groupie. And then he started taking action. I was like, you know what? Some people do not speak because they're dumb. Some people do not take action because there's nothing in their brain. And Patroclus, well, Patroclus is one of them. And so obviously this second action and his last action actually unravels the rest of the tragedy, and so his death and Achilles' death. And it's quite funny because throughout the book there is kind of this analogy between Melanga and Cleopatra and Patroclus and Achilles. And basically the story goes that Melanga was a great king and he was really strong, and during a war he was slighted for something, and then he decided, just like Achilles, that he wasn't going to fight anymore. And so his men were dying, and Cleopatra, his lover, came to him and pleaded and begged for for him to go back into war. And by the time she managed to convince him, too many people had died, and even though he went into battle and he was able to save his men lost all respect for him because so many had died already. However, Cleopatra succeeded. The idea was that Patroclus would do the same with Achilles. Except that he failed. He had like 2 conversations with Achilles about going back to the war, and then big man decided that he had a better idea. He came up with this brilliant idea that he was going to start thinking for the first time in the middle of the war, and what he came up with was that, oh, I am gonna dress like you and go into battle. So what was supposed to be the biggest threat of the book, which was Patroclus' POV, ended up actually being his biggest weakness and disappointment. Why is the useless narrator problematic? From the reader perspective, we are trapped in the mind of someone that we do not know. We get attached to his love with Achilles, we get attached to them as a duo, but not with Patroclus as a stand-alone, as an act. What makes him stand out of the stereotypical male love interest? Absolutely nothing. He doesn't have any dominant trait. What makes him special? And it doesn't mean that you absolutely need to be special for a story to be written about you. Obviously, not everybody needs to be a demigod. What was actually intriguing in the idea of giving a voice to a normally silenced character, it was to show that even if he wasn't the one that was doing all the killing and the one that was strong, Patroclus could have given us a very interesting point of view. It could have been very decisive. It could have been very interesting. And which brings me to my second part, is that if you do not know who you are, we have no reason to remember you. That is why Patroclus will always remain in the shadow, whereas Achilles will always be remembered, because Achilles took actions. Whether it was good or bad, he took actions. He moved the story forward. He played a role. Patroclus remained a very shallow character and not a full-fledged individual. And I think that is kind of frustrating, because this book really promised to make him real. They promised to make him a 3-dimensional character, but instead the author decided to slap us in the face with this 2-dimensional character, and because she really hates us, she decided to trap us in his mind. Now, it's easy to criticize, but what will I have done differently? How to make Patroclus real? How to escape the useless protagonist curse? How to build your character? A good way to avoid the curse of the useless protagonist would have been to go further into fiction by making Patroclus the voice of the reader, by making him plead and even try to save Achilles, to confront Achilles in his pride and his search for glory. You could have even used Achilles' affection for him as a tool or as a way to kind of manipulate him and be like, oh, if you love me, don't go to war. If you love me, go back into battle. And even let's go even deeper into this madness. He could have told Achilles, listen, you betray me. You have an old ass baby mama on my neck. You owe me this. I am going to come later on, I am going to ask something of you, and you are not going to be able to refuse me. And then when you decide not to go back into battle, after you carry your ass back into battle, because when we go back home, I'm going to have to go deal with that Princess D and your son. Like, at least create some tension, at least keep some hope. That would have been great, because it would have created some tension between the 2 main characters. First of all, it could have created some tension because it could have made us believe, for one, that maybe he would have succeeded. And so for people who already actually know the story and knows how it ends, we could have been like, hold on, wait a minute. Is she actually going to change the ending? You know, kind of giving us hope, like, wait a minute, is this going to change the ending? But then being like, oh no, they're still going to die. And then, you know, it could have created something that would have kept us engaged into the story. And most importantly, Patroclus' attempt would have been enough to make him real. Because we can all relate to the idea of you desperately trying to help somebody that you love, but then being too far their bullshit and ultimately making their self-destructive decisions. We can all relate to that. And even if he fails, it would have even mattered, because just the fact of him attempting, trying, making plans, being his own man, and that would have been so interesting and would have made Patroclus real. The second video would have been to show growth, both in terms of physical growth and also like just character-wise. Like I said previously, physically, Patroclus was described as weak, meek, and basically useless. And it would have been nice to actually see a physical growth from Patroclus, especially because he spent so many years beside Achilles. I don't know, pick up a spear, pick up a knife, learn to fight. And that is actually quite unfortunate because in the Iliad, apart from Achilles, Patroclus was the second deadliest soldier on the Greek side, which actually makes sense why he dressed up as Achilles in the source material, because he actually could fight. Whereas it didn't make sense in this book, because in this book Patroclus didn't really know how to fight. It makes sense in the Iliad because Patroclus was actually a very good soldier. But for some reason, Madeline Miller decided that she was going to strip Patroclus of this growth. She was going to strip him of this physical growth. There was this entire storyline about Patroclus being a doctor, which is also interesting, but she didn't really do anything with it. So I'm like, and he could have been a doctor but still know how to fight, so there was no reason for him to not being able to stand his ground. Like, the growth could have been physical, like he could have went from weak to like actually strong, not being able to defend himself, to actually being able to defend himself, because one of the reasons why he was banished was because of his lack of strength, both physically and like character-wise. So the story starts when Patroclus was young. He actually unalived the son of a nobleman by accident. He was trying to defend himself, and he didn't even have the gumption or even the intelligence to lie, to just say, no, I did not do it. When I arrived, the guy was dead. Or to say, well, he tried to attack me, I defended myself, I am the prince, and you guys tried to kill me, and so technically you tried to kill the future king, so you guys should be put in jail. No, he didn't even defend himself. He was just like, oh, well, and so his ass was sent away, exile. It would have been actually interesting to see him actually stand up for himself later on in the future. Most importantly, there was this one scene in the entire book that was missing, and it pissed me the fuck off. It was the scene between Patroclus and his father. How interesting would have this book actually been if there was a scene where we could circle back on Patroclus and his relationship with his father. His father that basically threw him out and was like, this son, Patroclus, whew, useless, actually getting the opportunity to meet him away, and him saying, look at me now, look at me now. You know, it would have been such a good idea, and it could have been such a good way to put Patroclus at the center of this book, and to actually show his growth, and to actually show why we spent more than 300 pages in his head. We could have actually been able to see the growth from the beginning to the end of the book, but no, once again, we did not get that. Essentially, if you want to make a meaningful protagonist or character, you need to show us why we should care about him through growth, to the action that he take or do not take. He actually needs to move the story forward. If not, do not waste our time and just write a book from Achilles' perspective. I think what happened is that Madeline Miller started the book trying to put Patroclus at the center of the story, but like many people, she fell in love with Achilles and his blonde hair and his majestic feet, and she completely forgot the mission. So I had to knock a 1 star out of my rating. If you want to know why I knocked a 2nd star, subscribe and hit on the notification bell so that you can be updated when I post part 2. And let me know what you think of Patroclus and what you think of his character. And on that note, keep on watching, keep on writing. I'll see you next time. Allez, salut!